I'm Billy S, and today I want to share my first impressions of the Duskbloods Network Test, and also answer some questions from you guys, the viewers. Many of us got the chance to play the game. Myself, I got 10 hours out of the 5 network tests scheduled, and I have some thoughts. I can't show any of the footage though, the website forbids us from showing anything new, and I'm not exactly popular enough to get the B-roll that the bigger content creators had access to, so I will be rerunning the Duskbloods trailer over and over during this video. Please bear with me, it's just because I'm a smaller channel. I'm sure you're all wondering, what is Duskbloods? The answer is if FromSoftware meets the city trial mode from Kirby's Air Riders, but instead of Kirby, you're a big armored guy called Zork or something, and it is sick as fuck. Matches are split into 4 distinct phases, with the first phase being focused on collecting resources, leveling up, killing enemies, recruiting kin, and just generally getting yourself into favorable positions for phases 2 and 3. This is important because at the end of phase 2, the 2 lowest scoring players are culled from the game, and at the end of phase 3, only the top 3 scoring players will advance to the final round. These are determined by your points in the game, which are called Virtue, and I'm gonna go through all 6 of them in depth right now, so this is your little guide. The first type of virtue is Repulsion Virtue. It's rewarded for killing great foes, which are tough enemies throughout the map that you fight solo. You'll often find them marked by a purple aura. When they appear, they'll have a small health bar above their head, and if you deplete it, you get the points. You can also steal these points from other players by sniping the final hit on these foes before they manage to kill them, which happened to me once or twice, and it really pissed me off. Then there are Trespassers, which are marked boss encounters. They have a purple skull icon on the map, and if you activate them, they become co-op fights. Once someone enters a Trespasser encounter, the other players on the map will all get pinged with a notification at the bottom of the screen, and if you hold down the minus button, you can teleport to the arena and join the fight to co-op together and take down these enemies. The amount of virtue you get depends on how much damage you do to the boss in comparison to everyone else. That way, players who get really involved in a Trespasser fight are rewarded more than those that appear and then leave immediately. It's a neat system. Flame Virtue is rewarded for finding corpses that are sitting down in chairs throughout the map. During each phase, one of the map's areas will actually be marked with the Flame Virtue icon. It's a purple icon, meaning that those areas will contain those special corpses. You have to be the first one to reach and activate them, which will get you their virtue, which can be between 2, 6, and 9 respectively. These are best farmed in the first round because it's really easy early game virtue. It's free points for doing the bare minimum, and you get to explore and find upgrade materials as you go. Commendation Virtues reward the players each round who kill the most enemies and who collect the most items, so don't shirk on killing weak mobs in the early game because you can get a couple of points off of them in the long run, and just pick up every item you see, it's worth doing. Other Virtues is a special category that is used in regards to special mechanics. Those could be a personal objective or related to events that happen on the map. For example, one round could have this Falling Stars event, and depending on how many of these falling stars are in your inventory at the end of the phase, the more virtue you end up collecting. Finally, we have the most important Sword and Pledge Virtues. These can only be obtained in the latter half of phases 2 and 3 by going to a ritual site. These areas are marked at the start of their respective phases before you pick where you go on the map, but they only activate halfway through. To get Sword Virtue, you have to kill other players while within the ritual site, which can also be risky because if they kill you, then they get the virtue and you don't. Pledge Virtue, meanwhile, has you go to these special pillars where you can pledge yourself to them by waiting a short period of time. Then, once the pillar is yours to control, you have to defend it until the end of the round. So basically, Sword Virtue is PvP focused, while Pledge Virtue is just king of the hill. But it is worth noting you don't have to go to these ritual sites when they open, you can just continue exploring the map and collecting other types of virtue, taking a more PvE focused stance towards gaining points. You don't even need to engage with other players at all, just focusing on tough foes and flame virtue and you can still make the top 3. I did it multiple times as a test. That's pretty awesome for people who aren't as good at PvP but still want to make a run for the podium. But what happens when you reach the final round? In the network test, this became a death match, where each player had 2 lives, and the player with higher virtue points got a slight HP boost. Miyazaki said in a recent interview that in the full game, some of these matches can also end in PvE boss battles, which can be determined by how you build your character before starting a match. So you may have some semblance of control over how you want your games to go, skewing more towards PvE or PvP, which I think is really cool. Now, our first viewer question is from Sad Squid over on YouTube, who asks, I would like your thoughts on the characters. I thought Layla and Zork seemed very strong, and the Senator was also good. So I managed to get playtime with all 6 characters, and I managed to win multiple games with 5 of them. Trang Lang, the woman with the big hat, being the only one I couldn't clinch a win with. I'm so sorry if I pronounced her name wrong. And I'm impressed at how differently each character plays. Albert is great at using his Bloodblade attack to weave within his melee combos, and his ranged gun is great at chip damage. I think he has a lot of potential to have some really cool mix-ups. Bloodhand Yan staggers other players easily, but locks himself into heavy animations, so you've got to be sure of your attacks if you want to survive. I love how powerful he is, but I don't think he's my kind of character. Trang Lang can summon a giant snake, and her projectile chakram are really fun to throw around the arena. She's got this high skill ceiling, and I know I could have used her stealth abilities way more than I actually did. Sniper Layla is a real standout. She has a rifle, she can target people with lock-on from afar, she's able to one-shot basic enemies, and get a lot of quick level ups in the first phase because of that. Add to this passive healing when under 50%, and that she can snipe in mid-air, and you've got a real pain to play against. Oh, and one of her special skills is that she can summon a Gatling gun from her stomach, which is fantastic against trespasser bosses. The Senator doesn't really do it for me. I'm not the biggest fan of his main weapon moveset, that's just my personal tastes, but everything else about him is really fun. The Spirit Birds as his projectiles, sign me up, they even have a little bit of tracking, which is nice. He can summon a Blood Spike from the floor as his basic power, brilliant, and he can turn into a dinosaur by using his Saurian form ability and just grab people. Oh, fuck yeah. Finally, we have Zork, tanky, large, in charge. His heavy attack comes baked with blue lightning, and he can launch into people, becoming the weapon himself. He can also summon a missile strike from his back, devastating power, but he does fat roll to compensate. Everyone felt different enough to use, and with the main game promising more levels of customization, I really can't wait to give it a go. But I'd say that Layla and Albert were my 2 favorites to play. Layla's just really powerful, and Albert's moveset is very reliable, while Samir Patadis and Yan were my least favorites overall. I find Patadis to have painfully low reach with his melee weapon, and Yan's animations are just too slow for my liking, but I know that's by design. Okay, next viewer question. Paul McSale on Blue Sky asks, is it a good enough reason to buy a Switch 2? Is it a system seller, as they said back in the way back when? To put it bluntly, no. I'm of the opinion that you shouldn't buy an entire system for a single video game, even if it's a FromSoftware title, but as a Nintendo fan, I do personally think the Switch 2 has a good library of games, it plays most Switch 1 games at a better quality, and it's all handheld. That's a good deal. It's also going to be cheaper than a lot of the competitors at this point, because AI making those prices go up for just about everyone. That being said, I don't even think FromSoft was expecting it to be a system seller. One of their PR team apparently mentioned that there were more people signed up for the Duskbloods closed network test than there were for the Elden Ring closed network test, and they seemed surprised by that, hence why the first slot for the network test barely got off the ground. On the flip side, it is an interesting comparison though. The Night Rain network test was exclusive to the PS5, while the Duskbloods network test was exclusive to the Switch 2, and the, shall we say, stereotype of FromSoftware fans is that they all only play Sony, and I fucking hate that stereotype, I'm just gonna say that. But it turns out, there were more players on the Switch too! I think that's a good sign, but a system seller, I don't think. I would love to be proven wrong though. User Man Like Pims asks, do you predict the game to be successful? It looks cool so far, but because it is a Switch 2 exclusive, it will not be played by lots, in brackets, if not most, closed brackets, of FromSoft fans. I wonder how it's going to fare a few months down the line, especially since I understand you need to match 8 players to start a game. Even matching 3 PlayStation players can take a lot of time for Night Rain when you play in depth 5, so I'm wondering how it is going to work with 8 on a less popular platform. Okay, thanks for the question. I do think Duskbloods will be successful in the sense that it will have a dedicated player base. It's quirky enough in its presentation and gameplay that it will almost certainly have a devout following who want to get involved, and Miyazaki is purposefully designing aspects of the game to appeal to newer players, including better onboarding with their tutorials, character progression systems in the main game, and speaking of characters, I believe it will have at least 10 at launch, which is the same amount as Night Rain after DLC. I don't think it's gonna sell like 10 million units or be this insane juggernaut title, but we shouldn't be expecting that to begin with. It's an experimental multiplayer game and feels like a passion project that Miyazaki truly wanted to make, and I feel that when I'm playing. They even mentioned in an interview that this game's been in development since 2021, they've put a lot of thought into it. I really doubt the exclusivity is going to harm the game all that much either. Bloodborne's been a Sony exclusive since 2015, and it's one of the best games in FromSoft's catalogue. You could argue that Demon's Souls suffered from exclusivity, but it also suffers from just being the first Souls game before the series got popular. There's also just more overlap between FromSoft players and people who own Nintendo consoles than you might think. The Switch 2 has been selling well after a powerful launch year, and with Pokemon Gen 10 coming next year, we'll be seeing more people buying into the console over the holidays. And when that happens, Duskbloods is right there waiting for a purchase. Also, and I really don't mean this in a bad way, but I do need to actually a tiny bit of your question. You use Night Rain's Depth 5 as an example of a slow queue on PlayStation, but I think that's a bit of a disingenuous comparison, because that's the hardest content in Night Rain. A vast majority of players will never attempt it. Duskbloods, meanwhile, is match-based, more like how you'd load into Fortnite or Overwatch, one of those types of lobby-style games. So a better comparison for your question would be comparing the queue times for a regular Night Rain expedition with the queue times of Duskbloods. I just really needed to clarify that. Okay, next up, Terra Squid over on my community tab says, I fought you in game and you whooped my ass, lol. GG's. There's no question here, I just think it's awesome that one of my subscribers actually played against me. It was a good match, and if anyone watching at home did end up going against me during the network test, I'm so sorry. Mika416 asks, would this game be good for a Soulsborne noob? I've only ever played Dark Souls 1, watched my husband beat every FromSoft game, so will I be at a serious disadvantage, or will everyone kinda be on the same page come launch day? It looks like so much fun, so I'm sure I'll have a blast either way. Okay, I do think going into this as a Soulsborne noob is an interesting take, because you're going to have to adapt to the current control style that most of the Souls games have been developing over the last few years. You can tell I haven't scripted this answer, by the way. Like, if you're expecting Dark Souls 1 controls, you're gonna be in for a shock, because it is incredibly fast, it is incredibly frenetic, but I do think that the tutorials for Duskbloods are actually fairly good. They really teach you about the movement and how to get the most out of your characters. I think the challenge is just adapting to those controls and getting used to them. And once you do get used to them and you're more familiar with how to use the Joy-Cons and the Switch Pro controller to play this game, I think it's going to be a lot more comfortable. It is a very fast-paced title. PvP has always been a bit of a struggle for a lot of players in the FromSoft series, but I think it is easy to adapt to, and I had a better time than I thought I would. I suck at PvP in other FromSoft games. I have never won a PvP fight in another FromSoft game, and I won multiple matches here in Duskbloods. I think knowledge of the game is going to be more important than just pure player skill at the start, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to have a lot of fun. I imagine that FromSoft and Nintendo are expecting a lot of new players to start with the Duskbloods who have never played a FromSoft game before. So in that sense, I think it's a good call. That being said, I also would recommend maybe, if you can, trying Night Rain out if your husband owns it, just to give it a go and get used to some of like the newer control schemes for FromSoft games, and that might help you out when Duskbloods launches. Max Flavors asks, would love to hear about the map design and what that is like compared to Night Rain. And Umbra Bestia 5629 asks, how does the game feel to play compared to Night Rain, like in character movement and combat? How is the map design? Is it more open fields or closed in like a map with many corridors? And finally, how are the bosses? Are there any standouts in terms of design or moveset? That's all. I'm sorry if that's too many questions. No worries, Umbra Bestia and Max Flavors, your questions are getting put together because they kind of work as in tandem. So, compared to Night Rain, the character movement in Duskbloods is far more focused on verticality. You've got the fast sprint, but in Duskbloods, you now have the ability to triple jump in mid-air, and you also get a singular air dash when you press the dodge button while doing your jumps. You can also hold the jump button down before you do your first jump to get a larger upwards leap, allowing you to clear obstacles easier. If anything, like I touched upon in the last question, the main challenge is just adapting to the Joy-Cons after playing Souls games with a PlayStation controller for so long. Combat here is extremely fast and fluid, which is important given it has to facilitate PvP. You've got your usual light and heavy attacks. Each character comes with two unique powers, one that you get at the start of the game and one that you unlock after getting to a specific level during a match. Each character has their own distinct projectile attack, and you can fight in mid-air. That's so cool. There is a floatiness to many of the characters aside from maybe Zork, but he's in a suit of armor, so it makes sense he'd be a bit heftier. I think the best players will be weaving their special attacks and their projectiles into their regular attack combos to keep up the pressure on their opponents, and that sort of oppressive playstyle isn't something I've experienced much before. It's interesting, but can feel brutal to play against when you're the one on the back foot. Definitely not for everyone. If you couldn't get into Night Rain, I think there's maybe like a 10% chance you do get into Duskbloods, but there's a 90% chance that neither of those games are for you. As for the maps, there are 3 in the final game, but we only played on one of them in the network test, and there were a variety of different area types. A giant open lake, a vast cathedral with winding stairways, a cramped sewer system, hidden caverns, vast underground ruins, a dense forest. Even when you're indoors, they make sure the ceilings are quite high up so you have room to jump around in case PvP breaks out, but more often than not, you'll be outside in the open air. That being said, these maps are vertical, far beyond that of Night Rain. There are whole ecosystems that some players won't interact with in a game because there's just that much ground to cover. There was this hidden flower garden on top of the main cathedral that most players never went to, and when I found it for the first time, I was like, oh my god, you can go up here. You'll be having moments like that throughout Duskbloods. I just hope that all 3 maps feel uniquely different to each other with their vibes. We know from the trailer that one of them is going to be more of like a steampunk industrial type with a train, which is hopefully going to create some of the funniest deaths if you're able to get hit by it. Miyazaki also confirmed that it will be possible to simulate matches with the CPU on different maps in the main game, which will make them a little easier to learn because you won't be getting hunted by real players. Lastly, the bosses. We have the regular elite enemies like the beast-ridden werewolves that appear throughout the map. There are also these dark panthers, I don't quite remember their names, but they were really fun to fight and they walked around during the battle. My favorite of these sort of like minor foes were the Nicol though. They have a few variants, but their designs are these like jagged creatures with barbed edges, a sharp finish. One of them has 2 pizza cutter wheels. It made them iconic as fuck. But the Trespassers are the proper bosses here, and they were brutal, since they are designed to be killed in co-op, and they're designed to be killed quickly. All the Trespasser bosses have their own AoEs and long-form combos that can easily kill a player who isn't paying attention. The Cavalrymen were the least interesting to me. They appear on horseback wielding various weapons, and often overwhelmed us when we fought them. The Lady of the Bog is the basilisk creature from the trailers. Yes, those sacks are exactly what you think they are. She has a lot of AoE slams, a brutal grab attack with her many tongues, but her large stature makes her a really easy target if a lot of Bloodsworn join the fray. Layla using her Gatling gun on Lady of the Bog just demolishes her immediately. The standout Trespasser, though, was the Vampire, spelled V-A-M-P-Y-R. This was a demonic humanoid figure with terrifying, bloody, vein-like wings, sharp claws, fast combos, and yet they can launch blood orbs in a vast cone, and mid-fight they can create these blood clones to further hamper the players. They were also able to heal themselves, but I'm not sure what actually caused that during the fights. Maybe it was when they do damage they had a lifesteal effect, I'm not sure. Either way, you never fight the vampire boss alone. If nobody else shows up to help you, run because you're not going to win. I don't think it's a shock to say that Night Rain has the better bosses because they're designed for a pure PvE experience with a regular combat pace. Duskbloods is just a different beast, and while I expect there to be some iconic bosses here in the mix, there are ultimately still resources in the matches to be bested and bested quickly. Though the tutorial of the network test did see us playing a non-match sequence with Albert that promised a boss fight in a flaming forest, so perhaps we'll get a few PvE boss moments in the story, I can't truly say. Now that's it for the viewer questions, but I do have a few small bullet points before I end this video off. The game ran about as well as you'd expect for the Switch 2. Frame rate isn't perfect, but it was serviceable, and I wasn't bothered by it once I got into the flow of the game. If you'd like a completely stable frame rate though, this game is not going to be your favourite, although they can still clean it up before release, so we'll have to wait and see. There was also a small bit of input lag reported by some of the player base, but not everybody experienced it, so I think that's also something that FromSoft will be working to fix before release. The music isn't terribly memorable. I like the theme that plays when the ritual sites open up in phases 2 and 3, but I'm hoping the main game will have a few more bangers I can add to my usual music playlist, or get in the background of some of these videos. You can teleport to various points on the map at any time, as long as you aren't in combat, which is pretty sick. And I should touch upon that when you start each phase of a match, you get the option to spawn in one of 4 large circles that highlight different areas of the map. The interesting part about this, though, is that once you click a circle, it lights up a little bit. And if it continues to light up, that means that other players are also choosing to spawn there, and this can lead to an area becoming overcrowded, which can lead to certain players spawning in really inopportune locations. So you have to be really strategic with where you want to spawn on a map, because you could spawn anywhere in those circles. You may be hoping to spawn on the north side of a circle so you can go into the cave, for example, but you might end up spawning on the south side of the circle on the other side of the lake, and then you're going to have to pivot to a different area. It's really interesting, and it keeps a little bit of freshness. The game also has a sigil system, which gives people personal objectives to complete. In the network test, each character was forced to use a specific sigil, but in the main game, they are completely customizable. But I have a really funny story to tell about one of these sigils. It was just the best interaction I had in the entire network test. So one of the sigils is called the Sigil of Love Ephemeral. It marks another player in the game whom you have to find and then propose to via a specific emote. If they say yes, you get virtue points, with you getting a bonus if they then make it to the final phase of the match with you. I actually found my sweetheart in a church in the first round, but she was in an alliance with another player. She let me propose to her, but after the proposal, the other guy then emotes with like this wave, and his voice line just goes, "I'm over here," because we ignored him. I wish I could share the clip, it was so funny. I didn't really play around with the alliance feature though, mainly because I kind of forgot how to ask for one. I do like that in the match menu there are options for games with no alliances and for games that only have alliances, effectively a duos mode. Customizable game options are always a good sign. That being said, for regular matches when it comes to alliances, you can start an alliance with whoever you want, but you can only break alliances at the end of a given phase, and if you're the one that chooses to cut off the alliance, a small portion of your maximum HP will be reduced and will go towards the person that you broke up with, which is unhinged. And that's it. If you have any other questions about the network test, leave them in the comments. I'll take a look later and see if I can respond to some of you guys. But I'd also love to hear from those of you that did play in the network test. How was your experience? The moment Duskbloods releases, I will be incorporating it into my stream schedule, I cannot wait, and I'd love to do some rankings on the Bloodsworn and the Trespassers and whatever else, maybe even like the sigils, I don't know. Let's go fucking obscure with some of these rankings, why not? So be sure to subscribe and I'll see you next time for another video. Adios.